Alright, in this video I want to take these cables and take that resistor, put some voltage through that resistor, and measure some current. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that my cables are okay. So in order to do that, I need to do a continuity test. Alright, here are the pieces of equipment that we have. One is a digital multimeter, and the second one is a DC power supply. Alright, and so for the multimeter, multi means multiple, meter means to measure, so that we can measure a bunch of stuff in it. So the things that we can measure are voltage, current, and resistance. And the DC power supply, we can give DC power. I've never used this multimeter before, but I know that we need to measure resistance. So I'm going to do a continuity test with the wires. And so I need to set my multimeter to resistance. So I think that's this button right here. Okay, and so it's two wire resistance. So when I look at the ports that I need to use, I'll need to use the ones that say ohms there. So I'm going to connect between the common and the port that says ohms. And so I'm going to connect my wires together. Let's do that. Alright, right now it's saying overload because it means that the circuit's open. So I'm going to take my wire, here, and I'm going to take it and put it into the other port there, and when I take it, I get some sort of resistance, a really low resistance. So now I've just tested that wire works. Alright, this is my second wire. I'm going to try, and let's see, and that wire works. So I can see that there's close to zero resistance when I go from one end of the wire to another end of the wire. So that means my wires these two wires that I've just tested are good. I'm going to go ahead and test the rest of my wires. The second test that I'm going to do is that I'm going to set and measure 5 volts. So I'm going to go to my DC power supply and set this up. So you can see that I've got output 1, output 2, and fixed 5 volts. I can use the fixed 5 volts. I just have to press 5 volts on and it'll put 5 volts out of this port, but let's just use the output 1. So I'm going to put on output 1, and you see it says 0 volts. I just adjust it to 5 volts. There we go. And then I'm going to measure it. Alright, so now I've got 5 volts set there. I've got my wires in. Now I have to measure it. So now I have to go back to the digital multimeter, and I go and I set it up for measuring DC voltage. So I press DC voltage, and which ports am I going to use? I'm going to use the one that says voltage and the common. So I'm going to take my 2 wires, put them in here, and hopefully, let's see, we get 5 volts. Okay, good. The last thing we're going to do is measure current through a 10K resistor. Alright, so let's look at what we're going to do here. We're going to set up a circuit where I'm putting 5 volts in through a 10K resistor, and then hopefully we'll see 5 volts across it. That's 1. And then 2, we're going to measure current. So 1, we're going to measure the voltage across our 10K resistor, and then also what we're going to do is measure current. It's also important that we do a calculation to figure out what kind of current we're expecting before we actually do our measurement. So I'm expecting about 0.5 milliamps. If I wanted to measure 5 volts, if I want to put 5 volts across my resistor, what I'll do is I'll set my power supply up to 5 volts on output 1. So this is my power supply. And I'm going to take 2 wires and connect to the either ends of the resistor. And this is my 10K resistor. Alright, so let's do that. Alright, what do we have? DC power supply, output 1, 5 volts, connected 2 wires, red and black. Red and black comes here, and I've got it across my resistor. Let me make sure that there's 5 volts across my resistor. So I'm going to use my multimeter and hook up and measure voltage. Alright, so these are my 2 wires coming from the power supply, and they're connected across the 10K resistor. I've got 2 wires across the measuring voltage coming across the resistor as well, and we have 5 volts. Alright, so what we're going to see here is we took our voltmeter function and we put a 1 on this side and 1 on that side, and we measured the voltage across the resistor. If I wanted to measure current through the resistor, what I would need to do is put my ammeter like this in the pathway of the current, so that when current comes like this, it goes through this resistor and then goes through the ammeter and comes back around. Alright, for voltage, the current will still go like this, but this has infinite resistance, so nothing comes up here and nothing goes down here. This has no resistance, so current will come through the ammeter and like this. So we have to set up our wires such that it will go through all of these components. Let's draw that. Instead, what we need to do is take out this wire here, have the current connected to the 10K resistor, the other side of the 10K resistor going into the multimeters, one port, and then the amp measuring port we are going to connect to the other side of our power supply. Let's see, back over here. Alright, so we need 3 wires for this. Let me connect this thing up. Alright, so on the multimeter we've got it set for measuring voltage. What we want to do is measure DC current. So we have to press shift that, and now we can measure current. When we look at the ports here, you can see this is only to measure voltage and resistance, and this here is to measure current. So when we're using the ammeter to measure current, we're going to use these 2 ports here. Alright, so let's look at our setup. We've got red cable going into the resistor going into the ammeter, and then this cable here going into our other port there, and what we get is 0.5 milliamps. Again, let's look at what we did. We pretty much made this diagram here. So let's look at it. Red wire to this black cable to ammeter, the other side of the ammeter to the power supply. Alright, it's pretty much that diagram there. And so that's how we measured. We made sure that our wires were good, we measured voltage, and we measured current.